All right. Welcome back to the Human Sexuality Podcast, episode 2. Uh, I'm Lee.
And I'm Peyton.
So what are we talking about today?
We're going to be talking about the mental and physical aspects of human sexuality. So, we're going to kind of have a sex education course slash why do we do this kind of talk?
Yes. I think best place to start is with the personality aspects of it, or at least that's what our researchers have us starting with. So that's what we're going to do. Starting with linking the big five personality traits to sexuality and sexual health. One of the really interesting points found in this was that in the study, it's quoted extroversion showed strong connection to sexual activity, um, which I mean, you would think wouldn't really be interesting. It seems kind of obvious, but
Yeah, yeah, it's very intuitive.
yes, but it does just kind of go to show that I think they go on to say like people who are more open about it, or more willing to talk about this are more likely to, be extroverted or more willing to speak on this stuff. And of course, it also says the opposite as well.
Yeah. I kind of find that the way that is interesting because that openness that you have to have to be talking about your sexual orientation, it's a very vulnerable thing. So it's understandable why a lot of people wouldn't want to. So it makes sense that people who register higher with openness in their personality would be more confident in that area.
And that really goes into the question of like, why is it such a personal thing? Um, is it kind of how we're wired, or is it more the society that we were raised in?
Sometimes I sometimes it seems like we are very influenced by our environment. So I would lean more towards it being a more social thing.
I agree. I mean, we see throughout history a lot more openness, in ancient societies, but then as we progressed, there's almost a shame added to it, which is interesting that we've kind of progressed to this dimension. So the findings in this study seem to support a proposed hypothesis that personality traits are associated with human sexuality and sexual activity. What kind of personality traits do you associate with sexual activity, honestly?
Usually I think of a confident personality. I don't know why that's my first ins like that's the first thing that pops into my head, just confident. You have to have a
And
confident personality for some
I would,
reason.
yeah, I guess that's what I would say too. I don't know if, again, society, seeing it in movies and stuff is influenced. Um, say for like a masculine's perspective, one of the things that we always see is like strength, and it's interesting. And for a more feminine perspective, honestly, I don't really know what I would associate with that. Tenderness, it's a weird word for it, but
Well, hmm.
it's not what I would associate it at least, but what I guess our society wants us to see.
So you're saying like you see it differently because you're coming from a male perspective. So you're speaking on the male perspective of how you view sexuality.
It's not
So
honestly my perspective, but we won't really get too personal. But I would
yeah,
say from like what I see, and I'm a movie guy. I watch a lot of movies and TV shows, but you see like let's say like the classics 80s college movie. Um, Gentle girl gets wooed by some big strong dude, you know, the nerd takes her glasses off and all of a sudden everyone wants her. It's a weird archetype that our like society has kind of built and structured. Um, and I don't really know why.
I actually used to be a film major. So I was
Oh,
very into that, like media, like I took a lot of media classes and how things in the media affect things. And one of those topics that got brought up was the idea of a male gaze and a female gaze when it comes to filming scenes like that. And a very good example, weirdly enough, even though I'm not fond of the franchise, is 50 Shades of Grey.
oh,
Yeah, because they had two different directors for the first movie had one director who was a female, and the second movie had a director who was a male. And if you compare the scenes of them being physically intimate, you see a difference in how the man is perceived in the situation. In the
That
first
is
movie, he's working out when she's gazing upon him, and he looks like a strong guy, and then kind of the typical straight male
right.
archetype. And then in the second movie, it comes off as more stereotypically like how a guy would see himself being strong and tough and like ready, and how a female sees him in that same way. It just
That is
different.
super interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never watched those movies. I saw a synopsis of why their relationship was toxic and I was kind of out, but that is a that is a really, really interesting perspective. Um, I'm gonna have to check them out then, just to look at it from that angle. Well, to kind of, I guess, segue from there, do we think there might be some kind of biological reasoning behind this?
Um, Probably.
Yeah. Well, much to the chagrin of Dr. Carrasco, shout out Dr. Carrasco. I'm a big proponent of evolutionary psychology. It fascinates me. So I guess let's jump into what makes sex work, what makes the human body tick, and kind of see what conclusions we can draw from there. We're going to start with the female genitalia, the internal and external, and Peyton's going to lead us off, and I'm going to ask questions like I do not know what she's talking about.
Yep. So we're going to talk about the physical stuff. We're going to look at the diagrams and talk about the parts and the functions of both of them. So we're going to have the female diagram up for this, and we're going to then have the male parts and then look at that. So
Yes,
since I'm a woman, I'm going to be looking at the girl parts.
and
So
I
first
will
we
learn.
start. So we start with the ovaries.
So now, what does that do?
The ovaries make the eggs. So it's like the chicken of the female body. We lace the
Oh,
eggs.
okay.
That's what I how I look at it. And then
Now, how does
when
that
it
turn into something?
it's starts there, it starts maturing in the ovary, and then when it's almost done cooking, it gets into the fallopian tubes where
Okay.
it finishes maturing and doing what it needs to do. So once it leaves the fallopian tubes, it gets into the uterus, which is also known as the womb.
What happens when a baby is made versus what happens when a baby isn't made? Me
Okay.
being your average high school gym teacher, I do not know.
Okay. So once it exits the fallopian tube, the uterus should already be prepared to have an egg. So it's been building up that uterine lining to create a nice spot for the egg to land and form. So if the egg does get sperm, it attaches to the uterine wall and starts to form into a baby.
Oh,
So that happens.
and if it
So
doesn't,
if it doesn't happen, it continues on through the uterus, through the cervical canal and the cervix
and
into
that's that
the
little hole
vaginal.
right there, right?
Yeah, it's that little hole right there.
I didn't mean
And
to
then it
interrupt you.
enters. Yeah, and then it goes into the vaginal canal, which is where coitus takes place.
Interesting.
Then we go to the outer part of the female anatomy. And I'm just going to start from the vaginal opening since that's where we just came out of. Sorry, that was a little on the nose.
No, I mean that's like a tour guide. I feel like Miss Frizzle is taking me somewhere.
Yeah, that's kind of the angle I'm going for.
Yeah, the uh 17 plus episode that we never got to see as kids.
Yeah. So we exit the vaginal opening, and we are surrounded by the labia majora and the labia minora. The minora is on the inner part closest to the vaginal opening, and it and the minora and the majora serve a kind of protective function in kind of keeping stuff from the vaginal opening.
That is interesting.
And then right above the labia minora and majora is the clitoris, which is surrounded by the clitoral hood and a bunch of fatty tissue. And the clitoris actually extends inside of the body as well, which
Oh, wow.
our lovely teacher taught us.
And I think we can see that over in the more internal diagram here. It looks like it roots all the way into the pubic bone, which
Yeah,
is super interesting.
it's
No wonder it's so sensitive, I
sensitive.
guess. Yeah. Geez, it like goes straight in there. I'm sorry, as your average senator, I know nothing of this, of course. So, are there any more external stuff that we need to discuss here, or is this all I need to
Uh,
learn?
I, I mean, there's the mons pubis at the very top, which is kind of suspected to be used as kind of like a buffer, like for
From
intercourse.
oh,
Yeah,
um, okay, I'm gonna take a break from not knowing what I'm talking about for a second because
that would be
I've al-
great.
yeah, sorry. I've also heard that um right, not heard, but I guess we were taught is it also used for bacteria, right? To keep bacteria out and other
Yeah,
particles.
the pubic hair grows around that area and also on the inner thighs going towards the vagina. It's a little different because like you usually think like, oh, if there's no hair, it's clean kind of thing.
Yeah, which
But it actually serves the opposite function. It keeps it clean.
when did that like the 80s, the 90s that started, that whole thought process?
Well, I mean, not to get too personal, but my mother was in that age of we're just like, hey, we don't really do anything down there. There's no need. It's a natural part of your body.
Well, I mean it is though. That's the kicker. I mean,
I
I
mean, there
guess
was a spike in pornography around that time.
that yeah.
So maybe,
I've always heard it get blamed on Playboy. Uh
yeah, I heard that too. I
but which
never
is
really
interesting
replaced it.
because the 70s, like they were famous for, not
Yeah,
shaving. But some radio show I was listening to a long time ago, they were saying that in the 90s, they just started shaving and that became the norm in the industry. And that's strange. I don't I wonder if there have been any studies on whether or not that is creating issues for vaginal health or not.
I think that's something I'll look into more after this.
Yeah. So besides all the internal and external, are there any
We
like
also have the secondary
yes,
sex
I was gonna ask
characteristics.
what else like what makes us different?
Well, outwardly, besides the lower genitalia,
Yes.
we have breasts and our hips have a little more, they extend wider than males. And we develop fat in different areas. Like women have more of that tissue around their legs and their hips and like obviously in the breast tissue.
Yes. And to protect the ovaries as well, right? In the
Yes.
lower stomach area.
I always get confused when I'm looking at these diagrams because I'm never quite sure the exact angle. The like the
Yeah.
left side is the buttocks
Is that
and
okay? That's what we're looking at. Yeah. Yeah, no, no, you're right. Wow.
yeah, that's the buttocks.
I actually pulled a high school gym teacher there. That's embarrassing.
It's okay. These are hard to read.
Yeah, I'm not a surgeon, I'm a psychologist. That's what
Yeah.
I'll say at least. So, but anyway, I think that was a really good overview. And now I'm going to be discussing the male anatomy. Um, so to start with, we have the testes. Um, this is where the sperm is produced.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
yes. Um, and that is also attached with the epidermis, which is the I hate to say it, but like the tube that gets it where it needs to go.
So
Um,
that's kind of like the fallopian tube.
yeah, the uh we talked about how, when we are being grown, we all kind of start out very similarly, which it was just interesting because you mentioned that, but like the penis is just a clitoris when it starts out, and then it grows into what it becomes. But kind of that allegory, or I guess like a simile to the fallopian tube, is very apt because it is very very similar.
That makes sense. Like they both essentially doing the same function, just kind of a different means of transportation, I guess.
Yes, exactly, and a different passenger too, I guess, is a
Yeah.
good way of looking at it too. Um,
Yeah.
and the Demas, I don't know. I think that's how it's pronounced. I don't really speak Greek. I think that's Greek. Travels up to the vas deferens, which um, is another tube that gets it to where it's going. All of this is wrapped up in the scrotum, um, which is uh, the protective layer. Another interesting thing, I believe we are the only species with the scrotum outside of our bodies.
Yeah, I've
Um,
always like thought
or
that
maybe it's the
was.
penis. Yeah, it is weird. It's almost,
Are
why did
there
we
any
evolve that way?
advantages to it? Like, I know it's meant to protect it, but does it really protect it?
Uh, I think it keeps it warm. It's like a heat regulator. I misquoted that, by the way. We are the only animal that has a penis outside of our bodies.
Ah,
A lot of other animals have scrotums outside of their bodies. But I don't know why that we evolved that way. One of the mysteries lost to time, I guess. But it might have something to
with
do with
temperature regulation, because like the
yeah.
internal core is really hot. So if it was inside, it would
Well,
have
it could also be like, our style of mating. We're very visual, or at least our, ancestor were. Might have something to do with it. Anyway, enough speculation. We're talking anatomy here. Sorry.
yes.
So we were on the vastus friends. This travels all the way through to the ampulla of the vas deferens, which gets it, and it goes through the prostate gland. Which, just quick aside, men, make sure you get that checked. It's very important.
Yeah, it
Um,
seems like it's really close to another canal.
yes, exactly. uh, every man's fear, I suppose, but it is vastly important, and without that, basically nothing else in this whole area works. So go to the doctor, kids, when you're old enough. Anyway, so then that goes down through. You notice in this diagram that all these tubes connect and follow a very, very straight path. It goes all the way through into the urethra, which is where we're getting into the penis now, and it comes out the external urethra opening. One difference between men and women that is very needs to be said. As we can see, the urinary bladder is also connected to the prostate. It both comes out of the same hole. So to put it bluntly, but
Clean.
also yeah, yeah, just clean it. Um, Two other important things that we're not going to gloss over is the corpus cavernosum and the corpus spongiosum.
Oh,
And
that's
when
a good name.
Yeah, very good name. Essentially, it's spongy material that when it fills with blood during arousal, it becomes erect, which I guess is another thing. I think Dr. Bates, shout out Dr. Bates, put it really well. He said, you know, when you have blood flowing to it, it's not going to other parts of your body, uh, which is, I guess, why it's not always erect and ready to go, because it needs to be for like very specific reasons, which is
Explain why
interesting.
some people like say they feel lightheaded.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. Never actually thought about that. But the reason he said it was like, if you take Viagra, or, they say don't let it last more than 4 hours. Um, and you never really
Yeah.
think of why, but it's bad for all that blood to be down there and not in your brain. Um,
Interesting tidbit because you mentioned Viagra. One of my biology teachers, he actually told us this little tidbit of information that Viagra started off as a heart medication, and I had
what?
no idea about that. Yeah, he said that it like started as a heart medication, and then they saw that it had other uses as well. And so they
Yeah.
changed the marketing on it.
So that's really it about the internal. The external, we have the penis. We talked about the scrotum, the foreskin, of course. I want to put a quick little blurb in here that circumcision is, you know, interesting. It's a religious rite in a lot of places. And I understand that, but like, what damage could we be doing? Because the foreskin, it self lubricates. You got to clean it well, but it does serve some advantage there. And they say that it reduces prostate cancer, but I don't know if that's ever actually been proven.
And from a sociological standpoint, we don't really see an issue with men being circumcised in the US, but for women to be circumcised here, it's a very taboo topic
Yeah, I
that
mean,
people are very against.
it's
So
spoken, yeah, it's
why is
spoken
there a
on
difference?
the level of mutilation almost,
Which in
which
a
is
lot of cases it is.
yeah,
It is.
absolutely 100%. Um, but would this also be considered that? Not to get too off topic, but
I mean, I guess it just depends on where your standpoint is on it.
of course, it's a
The
not to
social
go back to
aspect of
our,
it.
yeah, sorry, not to go back to our last podcast, but it is a several thousand-year-old religious rite. Um, but not everyone in the US, because it's everywhere in the US. It's an absurd number. I don't want to spit out some percentage that I know is probably incorrect, but it is an absurd number. It's just basically become common practice here. Um, I guess the question is why. Um, but we're not going to speculate on that. I think it might
Yeah,
be
'cause I don't think you
best
can
to move.
answer it either.
Yeah, might be best to move along. Um,
Yeah.
so some of the other differences, not to just drop a bomb and leave, but some of the other differences that men have, they're more likely to grow facial and body hair, smaller breasts, lower drop in vocal pitch frequency. They're taller, less body fat, and they have narrower hips. Unless you're a hobbit, then everyone kind of looks the same. But for average guys, you see that narrow hip, you see that. I guess it's made for standing or running longer. Not really sure what
You could
the,
also see it as being compatible with the female side of things.
yeah, like a puzzle piece almost.
As someone who has a lesbian background, I have heard a lot of like
Oh
arguments
yeah, no, no.
of
I
like
hate that argument.
they always bring up the puzzle piece thing. Where it's just like it's just so naturally complementary. That's why it's right.
Yeah, well, if you're creative, there's more than one way to solve a puzzle.
Yeah, but
If you
biologically speaking, yes, it does fit together very well.
Yes, but we're not the argument I always like blow holes in people's arguments are we're not the only species that conducts in this practice. I don't really know what the proper phrasing would be to call it. But we're not the only ones. There's at least I can name three off the top of my head, like bonobos, elephants, and another species of monkey. I said three, I'll name two. But there's more than that. So it's not a puzzle piece. It's more natural and occurring in nature than we think it is. Or at
Yeah,
least that we're taught it is.
but
So
anywho.
yeah. So I guess the next section to get into are the phases uh
Yes.
of sexuality and how we uh get from point A to point B being sex. So we'll jump right into phase one,
Which is
desire.
desire.
Yes.
It can last a few minutes to several hours and may include muscle tension increase, heart rate, quick heart rate escalation. Your breathing may get faster, skin may become flustered.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's what really stops sounding like a drug side effects commercial and starts
It
going
could
into if you are experiencing these symptoms, you should stop desire immediately. Kind of what it
Yep.
sounds like. Yeah, but for more like what you can see, nipples become hardened or erect. Blood flow to the genitals increases. This results in swelling of the clitoris and the labia, the erection of the man's penis. The vagina starts to self-lubricate, and the woman's breasts become fuller, and the vaginal walls begin to swell. And on the men's side of things, the men's testicles swell, the scrotum tightens, and it begins secreting a lubricating liquid. Um,
Golly, this all sounds like a medical condition,
yeah, it really does. Anything that has the word secretion in it, I've never really been a fan of.
but
Um,
this is just what happens.
yeah, this is what happens.
So that's phase one. This sounds like a mission.
Yeah,
Phase
phase two.
one, desire. Now we're moving on to phase two, which is arousal.
Yes. Arousal goes all the way to the brink of orgasm, which is
So
actually
that's just
really,
the in between bit.
yeah, like you have the desire and now you are aroused. So the vagina continues to swell from increased blood flow. Vaginal walls turn a darker color, which is it very interesting that
I
uh,
didn't know that.
I guess the skin is thin enough for that almost translucent. You don't really think about that, but it does.
And no, I can say I have never thought about that before this moment. So I guess everything is getting so because it says that the woman's clitoris becomes highly sensitive, which is probably because all that blood is starting to pump to those areas.
Yes. More blood flow, the more active everything becomes. More
Yeah,
heightened the nervous system gets. Um,
because that tension is spreading across the nerves and pushing everything to its full extension. So it's kind of like if you blow up a balloon, it's more sensitive than if it's deflated.
yes, that's a really good analogy for that. On the man side of things, the testicles become to be withdrawn into the scrotum. Um, and for both, breathing, heart rate, and blood pressure keep can increasing. Muscle spasms may begin in the feet, face, and hands, and tension in the muscles increase. So it almost it sounds like an orchestration, like everything's building to a point, which is phase three, which is orgasm, or the climax. There are involuntary muscle contractions at this point. Pressure and heart rate and breathing are at their highest rates at this point, even though it only lasts a few seconds. And there's a sudden, forceful increase of sexual tension. So, with women, muscles of the vagina contract. The uterus may also undergo rhythmic contractions, and in men, rhythmic contractions of the muscles at the base of the penis result in ejaculation of semen, and a rash or a sex flush may appear over the whole body. Is one more time to talk about evolutionary psychology. I I think I've heard that we have orgasms because it helps draw the sperm, or women have orgasms because it helps draw the sperm into like further up the vaginal canal.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that a lot. A lot. It feels awkward, but all we're talking are the functionality of what the anatomy we just discussed does. It's just the
Yes.
transportation towards
Yeah,
something. So, like,
point A to point B.
yeah, and it's just this is how the body does it.
Yes. It's what we all evolved with and became. And now that we have this society built to where, the population is, I think we just hit 8 billion or 7 billion, some ridiculous number. Um, we don't need orgasms for birthing reasons. We've had this sexual revolution where uh, men have discovered the female orgasm and pleasure is now more involved in sex.
So you would kind of lean more towards that it serves functions outside of purely what it does. It also serves some psychological needs.
Yes, I think so. I think the I mean, have you ever listened to a dubstep song that has a really long build up and a super disappointing drop?
That's what the phases are.
Yeah, that's kind of how I would say it. Like, if if you go through, 'cause I mean, like it said, arousal can last the entire time during coitus, desire can last for a few hours. If you go through all this tension and there's no relief, that creates issues, A, psychologically and B, physically, in a lot of cases. Pain, strain, anything else that rhymes with those words. I think we do need to have this release, and I think that rush of endorphins afterwards is part of the reason that sex is more used to find a connection with people now, instead of like, we're here to get a job done. At least that's how I view it. There's probably people out there who still view it that way, unfortunately.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yes.
Uh,
And
so with all that release comes phase four, which is the resolution. With the resolution, the body slowly returns to its normal functionality. The swelled and erect parts return to their previous size and color, hopefully.
yes.
Um, a general sense of well-being and being and often fatigue, probably from the exercise, and sense of well-being that speaks to the psychological need of
Yes, absolutely.
the psychological need of that is filled from sex. So some women are capable of rapid return to orgasm phase with further sexual stimulation and may experience multiple orgasms. I did know this already. Is that something you knew before this had
Yes,
to go?
actually. Super interesting. And like, to talk about another animal besides humans, lions do something similar during their mating period. The female lion is super aggressive, and if a male lion can't keep up, she just starts biting him. We're a little more civilized than that, I should hope. But
Might have to do with like how the different bodies perform the same function. Like the penis becomes erect and fills with blood and to become ready, and the female just we do have blood go there, but there's also lubrication that happens.
so I think now is as good a time as any to start the wrap up of this extra long podcast. So yeah, so we talked about the personality, behavioral side of sex. We talked about the biological side. I think everyone learned something, including the speakers.
Yeah,
Um, we
I learned
learned
a lot.
that we had more patience than we thought we did too. Um,
Learned about
so
a few things about our bodies that we might not have known before. So
yeah,
that was
absolutely.
fun.
It was a little bit of a bumpy road, but turned out to be a very, very educational podcast. So I guess we will sign off here.
Hmm.
I've been Lee, with
And
my
I'm
co-host
Peyton.
Peyton. Yeah, Peyton, there you go. Should have let you said it yourself. Shout out to our editor Callie, who is going to have a field day with all of this. And shout out to our research team, who always make it easy when we don't make it hard on ourselves. Madeline, Lydia, and Anna. Always pleasure working with them. But we will see you guys in the next podcast. Really, Dr. Carrasco. But
Signing off.
signing off.